ladies and gentlemen, we have been hearing top experts and thinkers on India and Tibet and China and world situation. I think the important point Cloud RP made is about what we call the cartographic aggression of China. They have this tradition of presenting maps, changing names, and General Bhatia was also saying that they have this step-by-step method of colonization. And we heard earlier also about how communism is based on lies and on domination. So it's quite clear that there is a big threat up north, and that we are really feeling the brunt of it, with 60,000 troops nearly mobilized for last almost 4 years, and no de-escalation happening, and also constant state of alert all along the LAC, with fresh attempts at infiltration. We are happy to note that at least some incidents have come to light where it seems the US intelligence supported and gave us advance information through which we could thwart some of the infiltrations in Tawang sector. And I think increasingly it is quite clear that India must collaborate with like-minded strategic partners to be able to deal with this challenge. And I think that I'm sure everybody agrees that we should go forward on that front. And as far as Tibet being some kind of a card that can be dispensed or used as a bargaining chip, that's again probably a misunderstanding of the Chinese state, and especially the current regime of Xi Jinping. Because if you yield an inch, they will ask you for the yard. That is the kind of mindset. So I don't think any compromise is really possible. There are some who are even saying in India that, we should not be so closely aligned with the United States. We should maybe go back to non-alignment, meaning equidistance between China and the US. When you have 60,000 troops, breathing down our necks, and when they're challenging us, how can we be equidistant? There's just no question of that, right? So there are so Tibet is in many ways the crucible through which our larger strategy and grand strategy has to be reformulated. And the first step that Cloud RP is asking us all, not only the state, but ordinary citizens, there are a lot of young people here in the audience, we must go back and maintain the original names and the nomenclatures which have lasted for millennia, and how can they just change it in 5 years or in 1 year or in 10 years, right? So this is the so-called communist revolutionary mindset, which is to erase everything. And our panelists also mentioned. We have time for one last round where I want shorter responses from each of you, especially keeping the youth in mind. Excellency Sikyong, how can the young people of India, we have a huge youth bulge and a demographic advantage. We are going to be young when China will be old. We will be equal of China in GDP and in military power in due time. We will be a great power like the US and China, right? But how can we, and it is all going to be driven by the young people. So what is the CTA doing to maintain the links between the youth of India and your youth, the Tibetan youth? How can we make sure that the youth of India are not normalizing what the Chinese want us to normalize? And what are you doing, and what more you can do to make sure that the next generation, there are a lot of seniors here, but with due respect to them, 20, 30, 50 years down the line, the ones in the back, the young people, they are going to be leading, And how can we build the bonds between the Tibetan young people and India's young people, so that this special relationship will last forever, and the understanding will be always there?
Oftentimes we live under the illusion that since we have been in India for so long, in my case born here, we believe that Indians know about Tibet. But unfortunately, when you speak individually with a lot of Indians, it's very rare that Indians know about Tibet. So we have to create a lot of awareness. I've been traveling around the world, reached out to about 24 different countries, traveled to different universities, from Colombia to Mexico to United States to UK, where I spoke at many universities, including Oxford, Westminster, Warwick, and Aberdeen in the UK. And in India, we started this year to reach out to the Indian youth, starting from Bangalore, the state where I come from, to speak to the students about Tibet, cover the basics, area, location, why Tibet is, geostrategically important, environmentally important, the importance of Tibetan Buddhist culture for promotion of peace in the world, and then the situation in Tibet, all of those. In Bangalore, I've covered Mount Carmel's College, I've covered St. Joseph's University and Ramaya University. Day after tomorrow, I'm going to Symbiosis in Pune to speak to the younger generation, and from this year to next year, we will be covering a lot more universities to speak about Tibet and its relation with India, because even elderly people don't know too many details about Tibet-India relations. So I think that there is definitely more need for awareness creation, which it'll not be me doing, but you have all the members of the core group who had a meeting representing from Pondicherry, from Karnataka, from everywhere, from Arunachal Pradesh, who happens to be the co-convener. So you have all the members of the core group also from Central India, North India. Professor Anand Kumarji is also here from the Indo-Tibetan Friendship Society. So all the Tibet support groups are here. So we have to do this in a concerted way, working with the core group members from different regions to reach out to different colleges and universities. And we will be pushing this forward.
That's great, sir. That's great. We need more of that. Ambassador Sinha, I was in China a few years ago when they were, the Friendship Association, they keep hosting Indian delegations. I remember the Communist Party head of the India Friendship Association, he thumped his fist on the table and said, the big problem for India from our point of view is you got the Dalai Lama, on your soil, and this is a bigger threat to the national security of China than United States supplying missiles to Taiwan. And he said, we can handle the missiles, we got enough firepower to deter the Americans in the Pacific. But you people are, harboring the Dalai Lama. There's a lot of, speculation about the future of the Tibetan leadership, with His Holiness getting on in age. The Chinese have the strategy. There's so much, parlor games being played. What do you think India's position should be on this issue, and how can we briefly, make sure that this great institution that has survived for so many centuries remains intact and does not get become another pawn or suborned into the, this renaming or reclaiming business of the Chinese?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer, but we have to remember that in India-China relations, the problem is not the border. The problem is Tibet. And China realizes that. Now, China hopes that after His Holiness, that then they'll be able to break this link between Tibet and India, and they'll be able to establish their control over Tibet. Now, one of the problems that the regime, the governmental structure earlier in Tibet was that the interregnum between two Dalai Lamas was always a period of instability, because the interregnum was very long between the time of the passing away of one Dalai Lama and the second Dalai Lama, the next Dalai Lama growing up. Now, that interregnum was very long. Now, fortunately now, His Holiness has passed all his political powers to the CTA. So that is what is important today, that the succession issue is now an issue of the religious order. So that is for the religious order to decide and take forward. As far as the political issue is concerned, it is the Central Tibetan Administration, which is the Tibetan government in exile, which has to take the leadership forward, provide leadership to the Tibetan movement. And that is where governments like in India should be working towards, to strengthen the administration and to raise the stature so that people like the Sikyong are able to lead the movement forward in the years to come.
Well said, sir, well said. Let me bring in General Bhatia also briefly for your comments. So going forward, is there, a chance of a limited war? Everybody, it's in the back of our mind since Galwan, as you mentioned. Is there a chance of a limited war in some sectors? with the Chinese? And if so, while we are prepared, could this also be help to reconfigure the balance of power in the region, and could this bring in Tibet into play once again, its status of Tibet, if there is a clash which is much wider than what we saw in Galwan, involving firepower and all that? And so it's not just about us deterring them, but there's always Tibet will come into play whenever there is a clash, isn't it? So would you like to say anything about the possibility of a limited war?
Absolutely. The war is always the last resort, but it is the last resort. So when I say possibility of limited war, I will not even say limited war, the possibility of war. But the fact remains that the strategic intent can change anytime. Like we saw Hindi Chini Bye-Bye 2.0 going on very well till about April of 2020. And then suddenly we find China, our two leaders had met 19 times in 5 years. And suddenly we find that the Chinese have come and done a forward deployment and occupied some areas along the line of actual control. So, but that's where war prevention deterrence comes into play. If we are strong enough on the both along the Indo-Tibetan border and strong enough in the seas, China will not wage a war. But if we are weak, yes, definitely. Why should it not? And today war is not a linear war as it is, it's a multi-domain war. There's a war already on, because China is into an information war, into a cognitive war. If you look at what China is doing, it has got a National Services Department, which is going to information war. Today everything is Chinese. Our children, if they look at cartoons, they're Chinese characters. Today Hollywood is controlled by China. So there's a cognitive war already in place. So we'll have to look at the multi-domain warfare. You look at the villages, 660 villages. It is called the Great Chinese Wall of Villages. And Claude Law will bear me out. 660 odd villages all along the border areas. So he's already into a state of war. It may not be the war as we see it, linear war, as we see it, but these wars will continue, and that is where you've got to prepare. Cyber wars. If I can take a minute more. I was talking to someone from the L&T, and they said there's a tunnel boring machines which they use for the metros. So that had gone off-road. So they tried to repair it, the machine can't come back, so they tried to repair it, they couldn't repair it. So they went to the OEM, which is the original manufacturer, equipment manufacturer, and this machine's gone bad. He says, no, it's not gone bad. You're not paid your installment, so we stopped it. So there's a chip inside. Okay. So today's the supply chain infection, even the mic I'm speaking would have Chinese parts. You have a phone, a mobile phone, 5,000 data points are with China. Please understand that. Each one of us. So that is where China has got a head start. And if we do not understand the threat of China, we cannot negate that threat. Thank you.
Right. We are already at war, and we should understand the threat. Very important point. Last but not least, Cloud RP. Tibet, great civilization, great culture, has given so many extraordinary pearls of wisdom on the basis of which people are finding solace and peace of mind all over. His Holiness is not just a spiritual leader for Tibetans. He's actually a global guru, isn't it? So India, we feel specially for such figures because of our own tradition of reverence for those who are saints and sages and sadhus. So this spiritual side, we are also celebrating the spirit of Tibet these 2 days here. Is it enough for Tibet to maintain that civilizational core, and how do we do it when on the other side it's being erased systematically, as you have pointed out, and many others? What is our message to the Tibetan sisters and brothers who are under occupation on the other side, and what should we be doing more from our side in India to connect with them despite the barriers and the firewalls and the restrictions that the Chinese impose to separate the Tibetans on both sides?
I don't know if I can answer, but this is very difficult communicating today. Like I was telling some friend yesterday, China has recognized their own Panchen Lama, Gyatsen Nobu. He went to the border to this first place, Loid, north of Kibutu, last week. It was at the same time His Holiness came from New York to Zurich. Now, this Gyatsen Nobu, there was, I look at the videos and the picture, there was 20, 30 people around, Tibetans. His Holiness, he had 17,000 people in New York, and 10,000, and it was booked. They could have, if they had been able to accommodate more people, they would have been double. Now, it shows the difference between His Holiness and the person who is going to be saved. Now, how to pass this information to Tibet? So I think I'll leave it to Honorable Si Kyong to find ways, but we have to find ways. Even army, everybody has to find ways to communicate with the people that they should know that this has happened, because it's something that they cannot do. You see, if you mentioned this Xiaogang village, 620 or 50, whatever, on the border. Now, if you look at this village, I've looked at hundreds of pictures, I've collected videos, and there's not a single prayer flag. There's no stupa, there's no gompa. So I'm telling my friend in Ladakh, and I think the army has taken it seriously. 14 Corps is really trying to celebrate His Holiness' birthday on 6 July, you know. But you should amplify this so that the message goes on the other side. Here there is a freedom. Your roads are maybe better, but there is a freedom. And if you allow me to add one word about what Honorable Si Kyong said about telling the youth of India. I've been thinking on one thing, I've been working on it, it's very difficult, but we should include it somehow one day in the textbooks. So some new textbooks have been recently released. It's very difficult, but because at the end of the day, you have to go get the clearance from the MEA. And MEA will be the last one to change the One China policy and all these things. But we, at least in IMA or NDA or other places, but one day you should target that to change the textbooks so the kids in 6th or 10th standard, they know that it is Indo-Tibet border. Thank you.
Right. Here there is, friends, Cloud RP is saying here there is freedom and on that side there is oppression. That's the reality. That is why spirit of Tibet is being held in the land of freedom, India. And it's a very emotional thing for all of us. But at the same time, we have to be aware of the strategic realities facing us, the threats and the challenges. And there is no question that the freedom of Tibet, in whatever form, will ultimately determine the stable equation between India and China, and probably even the balance of power in Asia. So there are big stakes here. And sometimes you hear more about Xinjiang and about what's happening to the Uyghurs there, because that has come up more recently. But the plunder and the destruction and the forcible assimilation of Tibet that has happened is a bigger tragedy and longer one. And I think the purpose of this panel and what all of the panelists are saying is that if we do not amplify this cause, if we do not resist the forcible assimilation that is happening, and if we do not call the Chinese out, then, over time, through lapse, the Chinese have this so-called 100-year marathon. They will eventually, succeed in absorbing and in completely decimating a proud ancient civilization which had its own kingdom and its own state at one point in time. So it's very important that we in India rise to the occasion and don't let this moment pass where we are slowly drifting and saying, okay, what can we do? We should not normalize what the Chinese want us to normalize. So that is the message of this panel. I want to thank each of them for extraordinary insights. Let's please, can we have a standing ovation, because there's such giants here sitting with me on the stage.
Chairman, can I add one sentence? I just want to add something that person, In 85, I had gone to Dharamsala. I was very young and brave with my motorbike and my wife. And when I reached there, they told me, go back to Delhi. His Holiness will give you an audience in Delhi. His Holiness, I asked him this. He said, Tibetan 6 million, China's 1 billion. And he laughed. He said, we can't do anything. We have to keep our culture. And that's, I think, what has been done in this exhibition. And he said, something will happen to China. And I still believe, it was 39 years ago, I still believe in that thing.
Thank you. Thank you to all our panelists for their enlightening contribution to this session.
Great to